The millionaire thought it was an arranged marriage until the bride lifted her veil. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main characters. The glass walls of Ward Enterprises glimmered under the Manhattan skyline. It was 9 p.m., and the city lights were alive except for the man standing alone in the boardroom. Ethan Ward, 34, billionaire founder and CEO, stared at the spreadsheet projected on the wall. Profits, losses, and names of shareholders. Everything was under control. Everything but his own life. The door clicked open. His father's longtime attorney, Mr. Clark, entered, holding a folder thick with documents. "Ethan," he began carefully, "the board has made their position clear. The merger will not move forward unless you appear." "Stable." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Stable? I have doubled this company's worth in 5 years." Mr. Clark hesitated. "They do not want another headline about the bachelor tycoon. They want a family man at the front of the empire. A marriage will calm investors. It will save your seat." The silence in the room was sharp. Ethan's reflection on the window looked like a stranger wearing a perfect suit. He exhaled, voice dry. "So, they want a show." "Not a show," the attorney said softly. "An arrangement." Ethan gave a humorless laugh. "A contract dressed as vows." "Classic." He looked out over the glittering city. "Fine. If a wedding keeps the wolves quiet, I will do it. Find someone who fits the part." Across the country, in a small town in Colorado, Grace Miller wiped paint from her fingers as she closed the door of her tiny art studio. The for rent sign outside had faded in the wind. Inside, her mother coughed weakly from the old recliner. Grace knelt beside her, adjusting the blanket. "Mom, please take your medicine." Her mother smiled faintly. "You should be painting, not worrying about me." Grace forced a smile. "I can do both." Her phone buzzed. A number she did not know. She almost ignored it, then answered. "Miss Miller." A woman's voice, formal and calm. "I am calling on behalf of the Ward family. We would like to offer a business arrangement. It involves a temporary marriage contract." Grace froze, thinking it was a joke. "A marriage contract? You have the wrong person." "Actually, we do not," the voice continued. "Your cousin, Emma Miller, was selected for the agreement but declined. She mentioned you might be willing to take her place. The compensation is significant, enough to cover your mother's hospital expenses and more." Grace's throat went dry. "Why me?" "Because you fit the profile," the woman replied simply. "Educated, polite, no media presence. You are exactly what Mr. Ward needs." Grace looked at the prescription bills scattered on the counter. Each one felt heavier than the last. The numbers were impossible. Her mother's treatment had already been delayed twice. She whispered, "What happens if I say yes?" "You will sign a 3-month contract," the woman said. "No emotional involvement, no interference in his business, complete confidentiality. After the agreement ends, you will receive the full payment. It is purely professional." Grace closed her eyes. The storm outside pressed against the window. "I will need to think about it," she murmured. "You have 48 hours, came the reply. "After that, the offer disappears." "Oh." When the call ended, Grace stared at her paint-covered hands. They trembled slightly. The idea sounded absurd, marrying a stranger for money, but so did losing her mother. 2 days later, in the marble lobby of Ward Enterprises, Grace stood clutching her purse, feeling wildly out of place. Security guards in tailored suits, assistants carrying tablets, the soft echo of heels against the polished floor. Everything around her screamed power. Then the elevator doors opened, and there he was. Ethan Ward. Tall, sharp-featured, eyes cool like winter steel. The man whose name was printed on every newspaper business page. He studied her quietly before saying, "Miss Miller, I hear you understand this is business, not pleasure." Grace nodded. "I understand." Ethan extended a hand, precise and cold. "Then let us not waste time. The contract will last 90 days. You will play the part of Mrs. Ward until the merger closes. After that, you will walk away with your payment." Her heart thudded, but her voice stayed steady. "And my mother's treatment?" "You have my word," he said, sliding a pen across the table. The pen trembled slightly between her fingers as she signed her name. Ethan watched her, expression unreadable. "Welcome to Ward Enterprises, Mrs. Ward." Outside, the city hummed with lights and secrets, unaware that somewhere between a signature and a vow, two strangers had just set the stage for the most unexpected love story of their lives. The ink on the contract was barely dry when Grace Miller followed Ethan Ward into the elevator of Ward Enterprises. The mirrored walls reflected their uneasy silence. She held her small purse tight against her chest while Ethan stood beside her, phone in hand, scrolling through emails as if she did not exist. When the elevator doors opened on the top floor, the space took her breath away. His penthouse office stretched across the skyline, with glass walls showing the city like a sea of lights. Everything gleamed chrome, marble, and discipline. There were no traces of warmth, no family photos, not even a personal mug. "Your wardrobe and schedule have been arranged," Ethan said without looking up. "My assistant will brief you. You will attend 5 events as my wife, starting with the engagement dinner tomorrow night. You will be properly dressed, properly briefed, and perfectly silent unless I cue you to speak." Grace swallowed hard. "And after those 3 months?" He finally met her eyes. "Then you will receive your payment, and we will both forget this ever happened." For a moment, she thought she saw a flicker of fatigue behind his cold stare, a man held together by armor. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared. That night, Grace was taken to a luxury hotel suite that would serve as her temporary residence. On the bed lay boxes from expensive designers, each tagged with her new name, Mrs. Grace Ward. She brushed her fingers over the letters, both fascinated and uneasy. The air smelled faintly of lavender and new fabric, but to her it felt like a cage wrapped in perfume. The next morning, she was ushered into a fitting room at a high-end boutique. Mirrors surrounded her, and stylists circled like bees. They pinned, measured, and murmured about color palettes. One woman whispered, "She is different from the usual women he brings." Grace pretended not to hear. At the first dinner event, she sat beside Ethan at a long table filled with executives and investors. Cameras flashed. Every move mattered. She tried to smile without trembling. Ethan leaned toward her and whispered, "Keep your answers short. They are here to see us, not hear us." When a silver-haired man asked her how they had met, she froze for a second before replying softly, "At a charity gala. He offered me a drink I could not afford." It was not part of the script, but the table laughed politely. Ethan's eyebrow lifted, but he said nothing. Later, in the car ride back to the penthouse, the city lights flickered past like restless thoughts. Ethan loosened his tie, exhaling for the first time all evening. "That story about the drink," he said, his tone unreadable. "Where did that come from?" Grace looked out the window. "It sounded more human than we met through legal counsel." He said nothing for a while, then quietly admitted, "You were right." Days turned into weeks. The headlines read, "Billionaire Ethan Ward finally settles down." Paparazzi photos of them walking through charity events filled tabloids. But behind closed doors, they barely spoke. One night, she walked into the kitchen for a glass of water and found him there, still in a suit, staring at the city through the window. The lights outlined the sharp lines of his face, but his eyes looked distant. "You do not sleep much," she said quietly. "Sleep feels like a waste of time," he replied without turning. She smiled faintly. "Or maybe it is the only time we stop pretending." He glanced at her, and for the first time his voice softened. "You talk like someone who has lost things." "I have," she said simply. "But I still paint." The next morning, Ethan's assistant delivered a folder to Grace. Inside was her itinerary for the coming week, and a photograph of a lavish wedding gown. A note at the bottom read, "Final ceremony to complete public image. Required attendance." Grace felt the world tilt slightly. "Another performance?" she whispered. But she had made a promise to herself and to her mother that she would see this through. That evening, as she sat at her easel sketching the sunset from the hotel balcony, her phone buzzed. It was Ethan. His voice was calm, formal, yet lower than usual. "There is a charity auction this weekend. You will attend with me. Wear something red. It suits you." "Is that an order?" she asked gently. He paused. "It is a request." She hung up slowly, her heart unsettled. When Saturday arrived, Grace entered the ballroom in a crimson dress that shimmered under the chandeliers. Conversation stopped for a moment as every head turned. Ethan stood near the stage, looking composed, but when he saw her, his expression faltered ever so slightly. The music faded, A journalist approached with a microphone. "Mr. Ward, your wife looks stunning tonight. Care to comment?" Ethan glanced at Grace, and something changed in his eyes, less calculation, more admiration. He smiled for the cameras, but his words came out softer than planned. "She always does." Flashbulbs exploded. The crowd cheered politely. And in that single moment, Grace felt a pulse of warmth break through the cold deal between them. Yet as she smiled for the cameras, one quiet thought echoed in her mind. What happens when pretending starts to feel real? The next morning, the newspaper headlines exploded with photographs from the charity gala. The caption read, "Ethan Ward and his mysterious wife steal the spotlight." Grace stared at the screen in disbelief. Every smile, every glance, every second she had forced herself to look composed was now plastered across the internet. She turned the phone face down, feeling the weight of exposure press against her chest. Ethan entered the suite just as she was gathering her things for the day. He held 2 cups of coffee, setting one on the counter without a word. She hesitated, then took it. "You handled the cameras well," he said calmly. "The board is pleased." The stock rose 3% overnight. Grace gave a small, uneasy laugh. "So, this marriage is officially profitable." It was always meant to be," he replied, but his voice lacked the usual sharpness. She studied him quietly. The man standing in front of her looked powerful, controlled, but there were faint shadows under his eyes. He had worked late again. For a fleeting second, she wondered what he was like when no one was watching. Later that week, Grace attended a rehearsal with a public relations consultant who coached her on gestures, tone, and posture. "You are not Grace Miller anymore," the woman reminded her. "You are Mrs. Ward, and Mrs. Ward never doubts herself." That night, after hours of practice, Grace returned to the penthouse, exhausted. She noticed the faint hum of a piano coming from one of the rooms. Following the sound, she found Ethan sitting alone beside a grand piano, his fingers moving slowly across the keys. The melody was soft, hesitant, completely unlike him. "I did not know you played," she said gently. He looked up, startled. "I used to. My mother taught me before the company took over everything." "It suits you," she said. "It is the first time I have seen you look human." He smirked faintly. "You say that like it is a compliment." "It is," she replied. For a moment, the walls between them seemed thinner. The music lingered, and Grace felt something shift in the air, something neither of them wanted to name. The next day brought a new set of obligations. A fashion magazine had requested an exclusive feature on the Wards, the power couple. Photographers filled their living room, arranging lights, props, and champagne glasses. Grace followed instructions, posing beside Ethan, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "Smile a little closer," the photographer said. "Pretend you actually love each other." Ethan's hand stiffened under hers, but then he leaned slightly toward her, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "Pretend?" she whispered back. "You are the one who told me this was an act." His jaw tightened. "Maybe I changed my mind." The flash went off. The photograph captured a moment. Neither of them could undo a smile that looked too real. That evening, when the crew finally left, the penthouse felt quiet again. Grace stepped onto the balcony to breathe. The city below glittered like 1,000 stories happening all at once. Ethan joined her, holding 2 glasses of wine. "Did you ever imagine your life like this?" he asked. She shook her head. "I imagined color and paint, not headlines and contracts." He looked at her profile under the city lights. "You make it look easy." She smiled sadly. "It is not easy to be someone else." He hesitated, then said, "You do not have to pretend with me, Grace." She turned toward him. "But I do, Ethan. That is what you paid for." Neither spoke after that. The silence between them said more than words could. 2 days later, an invitation arrived for a corporate gala hosted by one of the biggest investors. Ethan had to attend, and of course, so did she. The event would be filled with reporters, competitors, and family friends. Grace dreaded it, but she had no choice. On the night of the gala, she wore a silver gown that shimmered under every flash of light. Ethan escorted her through the grand hall, hand on her back, his touch steady but strangely protective. During dinner, a guest commented, "Mr. Ward, marriage seems to suit you. You have softened." Ethan raised his glass, replying smoothly, "Perhaps I simply found someone who reminds me what matters." Grace looked at him, caught off guard. His eyes met hers briefly, and for the first time, she could not tell where the performance ended and the truth began. When they returned home, she slipped off her shoes and turned to leave. His voice stopped her. "Grace," he said quietly, "you do not have to stay in the guest room tonight. I just thought you should know." Her heartbeat stuttered. She met his gaze, calm but conflicted. "Good night, Ethan." She walked away, closing the door softly behind her. Ethan stood alone in the quiet room, realizing that for the first time in years, he had no idea how to control what was happening inside his own heart. A week later, the Ward estate buzzed with preparation for what the media called the wedding of the year. It was supposed to be the grand finale of Ethan and Grace's contract, a carefully staged renewal of vows for the public, ensuring every investor believed the fairy tale. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, ivory roses, and golden ribbons. Everything looked perfect, everything except the truth. Grace stood before the mirror in her dressing suite. The wedding gown fit flawlessly, but her reflection looked like a stranger. The silk veil cascaded down her shoulders, soft and suffocating at the same time. She pressed her palm against her chest, feeling her heartbeat pound beneath the fabric. The makeup artist said she looked breathtaking. Grace only felt hollow. When Ethan entered, dressed in a charcoal tuxedo, the room fell silent. The stylists and assistants backed away discreetly. His gaze lingered on her for a long moment. "You look," his voice trailed off. "Like someone pretending to belong here?" she asked quietly. He hesitated. "Like someone who deserves more than pretending." Their eyes met in the mirror. For the first time, neither of them spoke as business partners. For a fleeting heartbeat, it felt like they were just two people caught in something bigger than they planned. Later, when the ceremony began, guests filled the hall, whispering, smiling, snapping photos. The soft notes of a string quartet floated through the air as Grace walked down the aisle. Ethan stood at the altar, expression unreadable but gaze fixed entirely on her. The officiant began the vows. "Do you, Ethan Ward, take this woman?" Before he could finish, flashes from cameras erupted like lightning. A reporter shouted from the back, "Mr. Ward, is it true your bride is an imposter? That she is not the woman listed in the engagement contract?" The entire hall froze. Gasps rippled across the room. Grace's hand trembled. Ethan's jaw locked, fury flickering behind his eyes. "Who told you that?" he demanded. The reporter held up a printed document. "An anonymous source from inside your company. It says your wife's real name is Grace Miller, not Emma Miller as filed." Whispers swelled. Cameras surged closer. Grace's vision blurred under the bright lights. She felt her world tilt. Every secret she had buried was now dragged into the open. Ethan moved forward, shielding her from the flashes. "Enough," he snapped, his voice cutting through the chaos. "This ceremony is private." But the damage was done. The guests were already murmuring, the investors watching with suspicion. Grace turned toward him, her throat tight. "They are right. I am not the woman they think I am." "Grace, not here," he muttered. Tears stung her eyes. "You wanted truth, Ethan. There it is." Oh. Before anyone could stop her, she lifted the veil and faced the crowd. "My name is Grace Miller. I never lied for money. I was offered a contract to save my mother's life. I took it, and if that makes me unworthy of standing here, then I will leave." The room fell silent. Even the cameras paused. She stepped down from the platform, the veil slipping from her hands and floating to the floor. The image of it lying there white against marble was more powerful than any headline. Ethan stood frozen, every instinct telling him to maintain control, to let her walk away and protect the business. But his heart rebelled. He watched her disappear through the doors and realized that for the first time in his life, he had lost something money could not buy. The ceremony collapsed into whispers and confusion. Reporters swarmed, investors demanded explanations, and security rushed to escort everyone out. Through it all, Ethan's mind was elsewhere on the girl who had just walked out of his empire with more dignity than anyone in that room. That night, the penthouse felt like a museum of memories. The veil remained on the desk where an assistant had placed it, a silent witness to the storm. Ethan poured a glass of whiskey but could not bring himself to drink it. The contract that had once promised control now felt like a prison sentence. He replayed her words over and over in his head. "I never lied for money. I was offered a contract to save my mother's life." At that moment, he realized the truth was not a scandal, it was her courage. And the only lie worth breaking now was the one he had told himself, that this marriage had never been real. As dawn broke over the city, Ethan straightened his tie, picked up the fallen veil, and whispered to the empty room, "I am done pretending." Then he walked out the door, ready to face the world not as a billionaire saving his image, but as a man determined to find the woman who had taught him what honesty truly looked like. The morning after the ruined ceremony, Ethan Ward's name dominated every headline in New York. Fake bride scandal shakes Ward Enterprises. Reporters camped outside his penthouse. Investors demanded explanations. The company's stock plummeted overnight, yet none of it mattered to him. The only thing he could think about was Grace Miller walking away, her veil left behind like a ghost of everything true. Inside the boardroom, the atmosphere was suffocating. The walls that had once displayed power now echoed accusation. The chairman slammed a file onto the table. "You have embarrassed this company, Ethan. The merger is at risk, and so is our credibility." Ethan leaned forward, calm but deadly serious. "I will handle it." "Handle it?" One executive sneered. "You let an imposter into this building, into your life, and onto national television." Ethan's voice dropped. "She is not an imposter. She is the only honest person in this entire building." The room fell silent. Without another word, he stood, buttoned his jacket, and left. Outside, the wind cut across Fifth Avenue. He ignored the cameras flashing, the shouted questions. In his hand, he carried a small photograph, one he had taken of Grace, at the charity gala, laughing when she thought no one was looking. It was the only moment she had not been pretending. He started calling every hospital in Colorado until he found the one treating her mother. The nurse on the phone confirmed Grace had returned home 2 nights ago. Without hesitation, Ethan booked the next flight out. When he arrived, snow dusted the small town like powdered sugar. Grace's modest house sat on a quiet street lined with bare trees. Light glowed from one window. He hesitated on the porch, the weight of everything he had done pressing hard against his chest. Grace opened the door before he could knock. Her eyes widened. "Ethan?" He swallowed hard. "I needed to see you." She crossed her arms, wary. "Why? To finish the story? To fix your image?" "No," he said quietly. "To fix what I broke." For a moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the heater behind her. "I saw the news," she said finally. "Your board must hate me." "They do," he admitted. "But I do not care." "Why are you here, Ethan?" "You got what you wanted. The deal, the fame, the headlines." He shook his head slowly. "I lost all of it, but losing you feels worse." She looked away, blinking back tears. "You do not know what you are saying." "I know exactly what I am saying." He stepped closer. "You were never part of a performance to me. I just realized it too late." Grace's voice broke. "You think you can show up here and fix everything with words?" "No," he said softly. "I came to prove them." From his coat pocket he pulled out the veil she had dropped on the marble floor. It was clean now, folded neatly. "You left this behind," he said. "But it does not belong to the company. It belongs to you." Her breath caught. She stared at the fabric in his hands, the same veil that had once symbolized a lie, and now, maybe, something real. Ethan continued, his voice low but steady. "I will resign from Ward Enterprises if that is what it takes. I do not care about the merger, or the headlines, or the board. I care about you, Grace Miller. You are the only truth I have left." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she took the veil from him and held it tightly. "You cannot fix me, Ethan!" "Oh, I am not trying to fix you," he replied. "I am asking for a chance to start over with no contracts, no deals, just honesty." Tears welled in her eyes, but a faint smile broke through. "Then start with coffee," she whispered. "No cameras, no scripts." Ethan exhaled, the tension in his chest finally breaking. "Coffee sounds perfect." "Oh." As they stood together in the cold Colorado morning, the snow began to fall heavier, soft and silent, like the world itself was ready to give them a clean slate. The coffee shop in Grace's hometown was small, quiet, and warm against the falling snow. Ethan sat across from her at a wooden table near the window, watching steam curl from her cup. For the first time since he had met her, there were no cameras, no scripts, and no contracts, just 2 people trying to remember how to speak honestly. Grace stirred her drink slowly, avoiding his gaze. "You know," she said, "people here think you are insane. A billionaire showing up in a town like this just to have coffee." Ethan smiled faintly. "Then let them think I am insane. For once, I am doing something that actually feels right." She looked up, studying his face, as if searching for the truth behind his words. Do you even know how to live without your company, without the board, without all of that control? He leaned back in his chair, his eyes steady. I am learning. It is strange, but I do not miss any of it. I miss you. The words hung in the air between them, heavy and sincere. Grace's fingers tightened around her cup. You say that now, but what happens when the press moves on? When the scandal fades? Ethan shook his head. This is not about saving face. It is about saving what matters. You showed me that power means nothing if you have to lie to keep it. Grace took a slow breath, her defenses beginning to crack. You think one cup of coffee can erase everything that happened? No, he said gently. But it can start something real. Maybe that is enough. Outside, the snow kept falling, dusting the street in white. Through the window, they could see children laughing, throwing snowballs, unbothered by the cold. Grace watched them quietly. It is peaceful here, Ethan said. Different from the city. That is because people here know what enough looks like, she replied softly. You should try it sometime. He smiled. Maybe you can teach me. She laughed for the first time in weeks, a sound so light it melted the tension in the room. Careful, she said. You might actually start to like it here. For the next few days, Ethan stayed in town. He visited her mother's hospital, paid for the remaining treatments anonymously, and spent his evenings at Grace's art studio. She had reopened it quietly, painting in the soft glow of the winter Sunday. One evening, he found her finishing a new canvas, a sunrise breaking through dark clouds. The colors were bright, alive, full of hope. He stood behind her, speaking softly. That one looks like us. She turned, a small smile tugging at her lips. You think we are sunrise material? I think we are trying, he said. And that counts for something. Grace put down her brush. Ethan, I do not know where this goes. I just know it cannot be built on lies. He nodded. Then we start with truth. I will rebuild my company the right way. But first, I want to rebuild this, whatever this is, with you. For a long moment, she simply looked at him, then whispered, then stay. No promises, no contracts, just stay. Ethan reached for her hand, his voice quiet but certain. I am not going anywhere. Outside, the last snowflakes drifted under the fading light, and for the first time, their story felt less like a transaction and more like the beginning of something real. Spring came early that year, melting the snow along the streets of Grace's hometown. For the first time in months, the air smelled of rain and renewal. Ethan had stayed, just as he promised. He rented a small cabin near the lake, far from his world of skyscrapers and stock meetings. Each morning, he would walk to Grace's art studio, help her hang canvases, fix shelves, or simply watch her paint. The quiet life was new to him. There were no assistants, no meetings, and no noise, only the sound of her brush on canvas and the steady rhythm of their days together. It should have been perfect, but deep down, both knew peace never lasts forever. One afternoon, while Ethan was stacking supplies in the studio, his phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. He hesitated, then answered. A sharp voice filled the line. Mr. Ward, this is Victoria Ellis from Ward Enterprises. You cannot hide forever. The board is demanding your return. If you do not respond, you will lose everything. Ethan's jaw tightened. Then let them take it, he said coldly. You do not understand, she pressed. Our investors have uncovered new allegations. They claim your absence proves guilt. Someone is leaking internal documents, and they are naming Grace as the source. He froze. That is impossible. Maybe, Victoria replied, her tone sharp. But the story goes public tomorrow, unless you do something. Ethan ended the call, his pulse pounding. He turned toward Grace, who was bent over a sketch. Grace, he said quietly, we need to talk. When she looked up, her smile faded. What happened? He hesitated. Someone is blaming you for leaking company files. They say you are behind the scandal. Her face went pale. That is a lie. I have not spoken to anyone. I know, he said, his voice low but uncertain, but the media will not care about truth. Grace stepped back, hurt flashing in her eyes. Do you believe them? He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Silence answered for him. She shook her head, tears welling. After everything, you still think I could do that? Oh? Grace, listen. No, Ethan, she interrupted, her voice trembling. You came here promising honesty, promising trust, but the moment something goes wrong, you go back to doubting me. She grabbed her coat, moving toward the door. Maybe this was never real for you. Maybe it was just another deal to control. He reached for her hand. "It is not like that." "Then prove it," she said. "Believe me when the world does not." And before he could say another word, she was gone. The door shut behind her, leaving the sound of rain tapping softly against the window. That night, Ethan stood alone in the empty studio, surrounded by her unfinished paintings. On the table lay one of her sketches, a drawing of a sunrise over the city skyline. Underneath, she had written 4 simple words: "Truth needs no contract." Ethan clenched the page in his hand, the weight of regret heavier than anything he had carried before. He finally understood what she meant. Love without trust was just another deal waiting to collapse. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, echoing the storm inside him. And as lightning lit the dark, Ethan swore to himself that he would clear her name no matter what it cost. The following morning, Ethan was already on a flight back to New York. The storm inside him had settled into purpose. He could not let Grace take the blame for something she had not done. She had walked away because he doubted her once. He would not make that mistake again. The city greeted him with chaos. Reporters crowded the entrance of Ward Enterprises, shouting questions and flashing cameras. "Is it true your wife leaked company files? Are you stepping down?" Ethan ignored them all. He walked straight into the building, past the security guards, and into the boardroom where Victoria and the executives were waiting. Victoria's expression was cold and confident. "You finally decided to come back," she said. "Good. Maybe you can explain why your wife sold confidential information." Ethan's voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. "Because she did not, and I can prove it." He dropped a flash drive on the table. "This contains the full audit of our internal servers. The breach came from your account, Victoria. You framed her to cover your own trail." Gasps rippled through the room. The chairman looked at her sharply. "Is this true?" Victoria's mask cracked for the first time. "That is ridiculous," she snapped. "He is trying to save face." Ethan pressed a button on the laptop. The screen lit up with email logs and timestamps. "This is your signature. This is your device. You leaked the documents to sabotage me and take control of the company." The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria's defiance faltered. The chairman finally stood. "Security, escort her out." As the guards led her away, Ethan felt a strange calm wash over him. The damage was done, but the truth was finally free. He looked around the room. "I am resigning," he said simply. "This company needs rebuilding, not control. I am done pretending that power is worth more than people." No one spoke as he walked out. Outside, the sky had cleared. For the first time in years, Ethan breathed without pressure, without fear. He pulled out his phone and stared at Grace's number. His hands shook slightly as he typed, "It is over. You were right. I am coming home." "Oh." Then he pressed send. As the message disappeared into the quiet hum of the city, he smiled faintly. The empire he had built no longer mattered. The only thing that did was waiting for him, miles away, with paint on her hands and forgiveness in her heart. The sun had just risen when Ethan's car turned onto the quiet road leading to Grace's studio. The morning light spilled across the hills, painting the town in gold. He had not slept, but for the first time in months, he felt awake. In his hand, he held the small box that carried the veil she once left behind, clean, folded, and waiting to become something new. Grace was standing outside the studio, brushing dust from a newly finished sign that read, "Art of Hope." She looked up when she heard the car door close. Her expression was cautious, uncertain. Ethan walked toward her slowly. No arrogance left, no defense, just truth. "I cleared your name," he said quietly. "It was Victoria. Everything is over." "No." Grace's eyes searched his face. "And the company?" "I walked away," he replied. "I had to lose it all to understand what was real." He opened the box and held out the veil. "You once said it did not belong to them. You were right. It belongs here. With us." Tears shimmered in her eyes. "Ethan," he took a breath. "No contracts, no cameras, just a promise. I want to build something honest this time. Not an empire, a life." For a moment, she said nothing. Then she reached out, taking the veil from his hands. "You always were terrible at pretending," she whispered, smiling through her tears. Ethan smiled back, his voice soft. "Then maybe this time, I will just be myself." As the wind lifted the veil between them, the fabric shimmered in the sunlight like a quiet symbol of everything they had survived. In the distance, the church bells rang, And for once, they were not a performance. They were a beginning. Tagline: the deal ended, but the promise remained forever real.